Hi newsletter peeps, thank you so much for joining me for a little unedited chatty video. I'm going to be drinking some tea. I've got some Earl Grey on the go. It's definitely getting into winter territory here in the UK. And you know what, it's not unwelcome, although there has been a shitload of rain in the last 2 or 3 days here where I am by the coast, and that could do with letting up. I'm getting a little bit tired of that at this point. You know, when you just get tired of it and you're like, okay, that was nice, that was romantic, that was gorgeous, but fuck off, would you? That's where I am. That's how I'm feeling, just to be honest. Okay, so I thought what I would do, darlings, is I'd have a little bit of a chat with you, drink the rest of my tea, and also unbox something that I have been excited about, that I've purchased for myself. It's been sat in the box now for a while. Let me get it out and I'll show you what it is. It is a deck. It is an oracle deck. It's a bit different to anything else I've got in my collection. There's no imagery in this deck. It's all words, and it's kind of like an either or kind of deck. I'll show you what I mean when I get it open, and of course I've started doing an unedited video without a pair of scissors to actually open this goddamn thing. Naturally I would do that. Naturally that would be some kind of a mistake that I would make. Okay. Fortunately though, I have all that kind of shit to hand because I'm super stationery oriented. Okay. So let me get into this and I'll show you what it is. And I thought we would just go through it basically, and I'll just have a chat about some of my thoughts about it. Maybe do a reading, and yeah, just spend some time with you guys. How are you? I'm going to leave the comments open so you can chat to me in the comments, chat to each other in the comments. It's been a while since I've put out a newsletter video, so I thought, why not? Okay. So I saw this on Instagram on the creators page, and I was just really like, oh, I think I would like that. Okay, the Fine Lines, 44 meditation cards for intentional living. This is the little deck that I've purchased. And I must admit, I am very excited about this one. I don't know why I'm admitting it. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm excited about this one. So let me get into it, because I saw images of a few of the cards and I just thought that's something that sort of takes my fancy. I really do like oracle decks where there are no images, there are only words. I'm really a huge fan of Sacred Creators Oracle, and I actually worked with Chris-Anne Donnelly to produce one of the course videos that came out with the Sacred Creators Oracle originally, for the original people that backed it, and that was a really great experience. And I received a complimentary copy of the deck and the book for being a part of the course material, making part of the course material, and I fell in love. And I really do enjoy those kinds of decks. I've also got my eye on the haiku deck that is made by Over the Moon Oracle. That looks really great. I think she's got a few decks that are just words with no pictures. So yeah, I thought to myself, I'm going to check this one out. So the Fine Lines meditation cards for intentional living. Let's have a little look. I like the backing. The backing reminds me of that nice paper that you can get from places like Paper Chase and Hobbycraft. Well, not so much Paper Chase actually, but Hobbycraft. You can get like scrapbook paper, and I really love that. So yeah, and craft paper and things like that. So that's what this reminds me of, and it's got a beautiful little peacock on it. Who can argue with the peacock? Oh, and it's got a teapot. Reynolds Dealer in Teas, Groceries. Oh, wicked, I love that. The little teapot. It's a sign, guys. It's a sign that it's time for me to take a sip of my tea. Oh, God, I just love Earl Grey. You know what? It doesn't matter how much of a shit show is unfolding all over the world right now. When I take a sip of Earl Grey, it's like a little port in a storm. Hashtag most English thing I've said all day. Okay, but the day is young. It's only the only afternoon. God knows what I could say yet. The early afternoon, rather. Okay, so basically the cards look like this. There's a really nice, like, sort of colour range there, which again is very much like Sacred Creators Oracle, for those of you who've seen it. You've got, like, in Sacred Creators Oracle, I think you've got the one black card that's like really stands out against the more pastels. Here you've got more of a range, which is really great. And basically every single one of them has 2 options. So I'll take you through a few of them. It just really gets your mind thinking. So the first one says act of kindness versus action for a reward. And immediately this just plunges me into so many different thoughts and associations and like situations that I've encountered and lessons I've learned along the way, and it's just really interesting. Immediately it just gives you something very specific to think on, but it's something that can apply to lots of different situations you may have been through. Act of kindness versus action for a reward. I love that one. Intuition versus instinct is the next one, with this amazing raspberry ripple pink background. Intuition versus instinct. I am you versus you are me. That one is deep, man. That one is profound. And I love the fact that there's a butterfly on the back. Give and receive versus give and take. That's really interesting, isn't it? Give and receive versus give and take. You know what? My whole life long I've used the term give and take because that's what my mum uses. So she would always say things like, it's give and take, Kelly, it's give and take. But actually, giving and receiving has a totally different vibration, doesn't it? It's got a totally different feel to it. So that's super interesting. Okay, there is a little word card here. My intention with... Oh, okay. So as we go through, there's actually little notes from the creator explaining what the intentions were. Here we go. I think I need to pull these out because they're obviously not... They're not meditation cards, but they do explain a little bit about the creator's intentions, which is really great. Okay, let me see if there's any more of them first. No, I think we're all clear. Okay, so let's just have a little look at these cards where the creator has given a bit of an idea of what the cards are for. Okay, it says here, versus comes from the past particle of the, what am I reading here? Oh, that doesn't say particle, it says participle. Okay, sorry. Brain fart there, of the Latin verb verto, which means to turn, to transform, to be changed, and to turn oneself. Okay. So it says here, my intention for these meditation cards is that they inspire us to grow as we contemplate on the subtle yet profound differences in our ways of thinking, feeling and being. By spending time meditating, contemplating and journaling on these fine lines, we embark on a journey of self-discovery that can lead us from conditional living to intentional living. I really love that, and the creator's name is Julianne Victoria. I'm going to carry on. This is one of my favourite cards. I saw this one, and this was one of the reasons I actually clicked add to cart in the end. It's discernment versus judgment, which I talk about quite a lot. I really think that there is a really important difference between these two words. They are part of the same family, but I think there's a really valid distinction that needs to be made between these two words. I discern all the time, but I feel that I very rarely judge. I feel like a lot of my judgment has got to do with stuff in my shadow that I need to deal with. When I judge somebody's beingness entirely, it's different to when I discern that somebody shouldn't necessarily be in my inner sanctum, or I discern that I shouldn't necessarily be spending the degree of time with someone that I'm spending with them, or I discern that a certain collaboration would not necessarily be good for me. That's not a judgment of somebody's beingness. That's a discernment based on my desire to protect myself and love myself. So I feel like that distinction is very important, and I feel like when we strive to walk a spiritual path and we strive always to you know, really connect with our higher selves and not to make decisions from base egoic need, or from any sort of low vibe stuff like jealousy, for example, or competition. We tell ourselves we're not allowed to judge anyone. We tell ourselves we're not allowed to decide who should be close to us and who shouldn't. We tell ourselves we are in some way being unfair by deciding that somebody shouldn't be closer to us, or that we shouldn't give more time to a certain connection, or that we shouldn't be involved in a specific thing that we're asking to be involved in. That's not unfair at all. That's actually very astute, and it's a discernment. It doesn't have to be a judgment of that other person in their entirety. It can be a discernment of something that just genuinely is not right for you as an individual, and I think it's really important that we make that distinction. So I really love the discernment versus judgment card. Vulnerability versus victimhood. This is a really awesome card as well that gives you quite a lot to chew on. Surrender versus giving up. this is a conversation we often have with ourselves in spirituality, isn't it? Compassion versus pity. This is a really important one. I love these cards. Okay, so let me go ahead now and shuffle this deck, and I will do you guys a reading, my newsletter peeps. I'll do you a quick reading. And let's just see what comes up. And let's just rely on synchronicity, the power of synchronicity, the power of the cosmos to give us a snack that's appropriate for us in this particular moment. So lean into the messages, allow yourself to connect with what resonates, allow yourself to be challenged by any messages that challenge you, and sit with the way that you feel when the reading is done. Ask yourself, why did I end up watching this video? Why did I end up watching this reading today? Because let's face it, you get a lot of shit in your inbox, you know. You might not necessarily have watched this. You might have decided to delete it without watching it. You might actually be slightly bored of my face and you might have thought of unsubscribing, but then you were like, you know what, fuck it, I've got a cup of tea, I'll give the bitch 5 minutes. And actually now you've ended up watching this reading. Ask yourself as we're going through these 3 messages, why? Why did you end up watching? What was it that you might have needed to hear? Maybe you just needed to see this luminescent shade of pink, I don't know. But if there was anything that you resonate with in this reading, then ask yourself, did the cosmos give this to you? Is this something that you need to take heed of in some way? And naturally, of course, before I draw any cards, I'm going to have a sip of this. I'm always really worried about leaving the swallowing in. I could never do a mukbang, you know what I mean? Like, I don't mind watching mukbangs because I know what I'm in for. Like, I don't like it when I am slightly irritated by very, very, very loud chewing or sort of mouth smacking. Somebody that eats with their mouth open and there's that smacking sound and it's very abrasive. But I feel like when you watch a mukbang, which is, for anybody watching this who doesn't know, any of my newsletter peeps who are like, what the fuck is a mukbang? It's basically a video on YouTube where somebody eats while they talk to you, right? And so they get like, you might have a vegan mukbang, you might have a fast food mukbang, you might have a homemade mukbang, whatever it is. I really enjoy the vegan takeaway mukbangs where you have like a pizza with vegan cheese or vegan burgers with vegan cheese. Like, I really love that because that's my happy place sometimes, is to get vegan takeaway or make something for myself that's really like takeaway like but totally animal friendly. So I like watching them. But yeah, when I watch a mukbang, I know what I'm getting into, so it's fine. I'm not bothered about the lip smacking. But I do worry about leaving the sound of swallowing in my videos. Oh, hang on a minute. I think the light's gone really fucked. Hang on. Let me just play with this now. Is that helping? Is that too light? I don't know. Don't you love these unedited jaunts with me, newsletter peeps? The light is just absolutely ridiculous. It started going dark at like 2 o'clock. Literally, England thinks that it is Scandinavia right now, and I'm not happy about it. Not that I don't love Scandi, but like 2 o'clock? Seriously? Are you fucking serious? It's bloody good tea. Okay. Let's do a 3-card reading and lean into some messages from this really amazing deck. I really love it. Okay. Supporting versus controlling is card number 1. Supporting versus controlling. This is really a very special card, I think. So, first of all, lean into both of those words and associate yourself with what those words mean to you, supporting and controlling. When you hear the word supporting, when you say the word supporting, when you listen to me say it, how does that feel? And what is your personal emotional connection to that word? What about controlling? Whereabouts does your mind go when you hear the word controlling or when you say the word controlling? What kind of vibration do you connect with from that word when you hear it? How does it make your body and your mind respond? I think that's going to be important throughout all 3 of these card messages for us. For me, when I read the words supporting versus controlling, I am moved to think about the way that we interact with people in our lives that we might be concerned about, the way that we interact with people in our lives who may ask for our support, and also the way that we interact with people in our lives towards whom we may be acting as a healer or a mentor or a guide or a teacher in some way, in any way, whether it's personal or professional. We need to really observe sometimes whether or not we're giving our support with any conditions, with any caveats, with any expectations. When we give our support, it's obviously much more spiritually astute to give it free of expectation, knowing that, for instance, if we give advice to a person, they may not take that advice on. If we give guidance to a person about the best way to do things, they may actually go in another direction and try it another way. If we offer our expertise to a person, it may be the case that they go off and they ask another expert as well, and the other expert gives a contrary opinion. Ask yourself, how wounded and how bruised does your ego tend to be when somebody takes your support, your advice, your guidance, your perspective, but then doesn't actually utilize it in their own life? How much does it actually sting you on some level when you see that somebody is consulting others as well as consulting you? Do you know on some level that you're offering somebody support at the current time, or you have done so in the past, and you've expected that they're going to do what you advise them to do? And how have you reacted when they've gone in a different kind of direction, or indeed when they've just kept making the same mistake over and over again? Sometimes we give our support and we need to rein the ego in, because the ego gives support with certain conditions attached, certain expectations in place, and sometimes also with a hidden agenda that we may not even know about ourselves on a conscious level. And that's why we do the work. That's why we do the meditation. That's why we do the deep self-development. That's why we do the shadow work. That's why we read the books, right? It's because we want to make sure that the ego is not writing the story for us in ways that we do not know about and in ways that we have not clocked. So we want to be sure that when we're offering support, we're doing so freely, with no expectation. We want to make sure that when we're offering advice, we're doing so from a place of just wanting to be of service, rather than wanting to control somebody's trajectory. We want to make sure that when we are giving of ourselves, we're doing so in a way that also allows the other person free will, rather than doing so in a way that exerts a controlling energy over them that they can feel and that they feel obligated to respond to by doing what we want them to do. When we offer support, we need to first of all steady ourselves in the core so that we know we're giving support from a pure place. And that can be quite difficult, especially when the person we're offering support to is somebody that we really love and care for. And maybe we've become a little bit exasperated with watching them do the same damn fucking thing over and over that's harming them, that is not healthy for them. And so when we give our support, we might give it with a very big side helping of control. But that control obviously does come from a place of love. We just need to recognize that ultimately the control aspect of our advice and support is not loving. It doesn't come across as loving to the other person. Everybody needs to do their own work, and this is something that I've really felt so deeply in my being because it's been so hard for me to get to grips with. When I have tried to support somebody that I love dearly, I love the bones of them, I love them as dearly as every atom of my own flesh, as I think Charlotte Bronte once wrote. One of the Brontes wrote it anyway. I nicked it, alright, it wasn't mine, it's not an original, just so you know. When I love somebody that fucking much, yes, I think that the support that I give them and the love that I give them and the encouragement that I give them may have a streak of controlling energy in it, because I want them to get well, I want them to do better, I really want to see them fucking thrive. And so there's a frustration sometimes in the support that I give. There may be an energy of control that I don't even know about, that I need to clock, that I need to become conscious of, that I need to manage. Ask yourself, whereabouts is your support being given with a side helping of control or expectation? And also, maybe the shoe's on the other foot for you right now. Maybe you are receiving support or advice, or you're having space held for you by somebody, but you're feeling their control coming through in the support that they're giving. You're feeling that they are very much working with their own agenda, and you're feeling pressurized to follow with their agenda. You're feeling a pressure to do what they want you to do. And maybe you can feel the disappointment that comes over them when you are still going in your own direction. You're still trying to have agency over your own life, and maybe that person offering the support doesn't like that. Maybe it's important for you to vocalize the pressure that you're sincerely feeling. You know, sometimes it's important to turn to somebody who is giving their support and their advice lovingly, but is being so controlling about it, and to actually say, look, honey, I really love you for what you're doing, but I feel like you're trying to urge me down this specific path, and I don't know what path I'm going to go down yet, and I need you to be okay with that. Sometimes a person doesn't realise that they're being as controlling as they are being. They don't realise that their support and their advice is coming on abrasive and is coming on aggressive. And sometimes just a little bit of open, honest communication can help somebody to understand the way that they're being. Let's have a look at another card now. I really loved that one, supporting versus controlling. That's a really great meditation. And it's one to think about with past experiences that we've had, both with giving support and also with receiving it. Whereabouts have we felt as though we are being cajoled? Whereabouts have we felt as though the support that we were being offered was not necessarily free, you know, that it was coming with certain conditions? Okay, so the next card to meditate on for us is sovereignty versus dominance. I love this one, sovereignty versus dominance. Oh my days. That's a gorgeous one, right? You know what, this kind of reminds me a little bit of the energy of the Emperor card in tarot, because one of the things I've always thought about the Emperor card is that the Emperor is in charge of himself. He wants to be his own boss. He is done with taking orders from others. He wants to rise to his own occasion and be the ruler of his own empire. And I love that about him. I think of him as individualistic, single-minded, someone who goes in his own direction, someone who doesn't want to have to answer to others. However, the shadow of the Emperor can be that he asserts his dominance over others. He sees his way of viewing things as being the right way. So, you know, in a sense, the Emperor can sometimes be the rebel gone wrong, because he's rebelled from what other people expect him to do. He's gone through his own journey of coming to his own sense of sovereignty and agency. But then when he goes into shadow, he tries to force his agenda onto other people. He sees that his way is the only right way, and therefore he turns from the freewheeling rebel into the cold tyrant that dominates over others, and can be very stubborn and unwilling to listen to other points of view, unwilling to hear other perspectives. He's like the bad dad, you know. The Emperor can be like that when he's in shadow. He can be like the bad dad that just wants to exert his view and his way over the household. And I feel like that can definitely be the danger of sovereignty. And for me, I feel like in my personal story, there's been a lot to do with sovereignty. There's been a lot to do with thinking about how I can survive in this reality. How can I survive in this reality? How can I make money in a way that feels right to me? How can I love people in a way that feels right to me? How can I be a member of a family in a way that doesn't compromise me and my views? You know, all of that stuff. And I've asked myself those questions. At the same time, though, the more sovereign I've become, the more individualistic, the more unabashedly and unapologetically myself I've become, the more I've also had to check myself when I recognise that I'm starting to see my way as the ultimate way, the only way, and almost kind of like secretly chiding others for going in a different life direction. And I've definitely been there at a few times on my journey. Sorry, sometimes my nose itches so much, guys. It's like I literally become Slavoj Žižek. I don't know how many of my newsletter peeps know who Slavoj Žižek is. Probably a fair whack of you. But you know, he's always touching his nose. I think he has like possibly has Tourette's. I'm not sure if he's ever said that or not, but he has an incredibly frequent tic, a facial sort of habit of touching his nose. And sometimes I just go there. I am touching my nose constantly. I think it's an adorable part of what he does when he talks, to be honest, but it's very constant and it reminds me of him. Every time I'm like that, I'm like, oh, I'm doing a Slavoj again. So yeah, basically, you know, I think when we are very vehement about being sovereign to our own point of view, and when we become unapologetic about who the fuck we are, we can end up being very domineering around other people. We can come across as someone who thinks their way is the right way. And so this kind of fits in a little bit to the supporting versus controlling card. I really enjoy actually the way that these two are sort of playing together quite nicely, supporting versus controlling, kind of reminding you to give in a way that is devoid of expectation. Like, don't attach strings to the space that you're holding. Let somebody have their own decision-making process and let somebody choose their own fate. Sovereignty versus dominance, a similar kind of thing. It's like saying, you know what, you can go on your own journey, you can discover what's right for you, you can really connect with the joy of being that individualistic self that you are, but don't try and convince others to go on the same road that you've gone on, and don't judge others if they don't choose exactly what you've chosen. Sometimes I think when we've gone on a big journey as well of personal sovereignty, and we've really come to understand ourselves, and we've come to let go of so much baggage and so much conditioning and move into our own beingness, let's face it, sometimes that kind of work can make you a bit arrogant, and that is the shadow of personal development at times. It's arrogance. That is the shadow of it sometimes. It's like we've done so much work to unhinge ourselves from so much fucking foolishness that we come to be very complacent in our ability to be illuminated and to be elevated and to realize and to have those revelations. And it does feel powerful and wonderful, but it can definitely make us into a bit of an arsehole sometimes if we don't check ourselves. We always need to be checking ourselves, I think. I feel like sometimes the deep work that so many people that I interact with online are doing can have that shadow. And I think that it's really important that we just recognize that, you know, we need to recognize that so that we allow our ego an opportunity to enjoy what we've been working on and give credit to ourselves for what we've been working on without trying to dominate other people's stories, especially if other people are not necessarily on a journey of self-development and you think you know what all the right answers are for them. You know, you think you understand what the missing piece is for them and what they need to do. That can be very loving when you're doing it, but the other person, believe me, most of the time perceives it as controlling and domineering and abrasive. And so it's amazing thinking about how much we might act from a place of love and the intensity of that love, and yet when our actions are received by the other person, they are received as domineering, they are received as overwhelming and overbearing. And that's interesting to think about, isn't it? We do things sometimes with the best of intentions, but sometimes our words and actions are received very differently by the person that's intended to be receiving them. Ask yourself, whereabouts is somebody else's sovereignty getting in the way of your personal journey and what you want to do? Is someone trying to drag you kicking and screaming down the life path that they've chosen? And if so, do you need to assert a boundary? Do you maybe need to spend a little bit less time with that person, at least on a very temporary basis, until you can really lock into your core and know what it is that you want to do and know who it is that you are? And also ask yourself, whereabouts is your sovereignty and your vehement sense of self perhaps encroaching on someone else? Whereabouts do you need to back off and let that person flourish into who they are? And maybe let that person speak a little bit more about their experiences without putting your own frame of reference onto those experiences. Sometimes, especially when we're more practiced with personal development and we've been at it longer, we can end up talking over people who are only just starting out on their own journey. And maybe we might want to, you know, offer that person shortcuts or help somebody understand something that maybe we think they're not getting. But that can be domineering and that can be uncomfortable. We can swallow up a lot of energy in the room when we behave that way. Let's take a look at the final card for our meditation reading today. So grey outside, guys. Okay. So the final card that's come through, discernment versus judgment, that I told you guys was my favourite from this deck. Discernment versus judgment. Now, as I mentioned to you guys, you know, when I was talking a little bit about this card, I feel like we do need to give ourselves permission sometimes to discern that something or someone is not right. And we can end up feeling intensely guilty about this. And I think one of the reasons we can feel guilty about it is because there's so much dialogue and so much literature in the spiritual realm about dropping judgment, right? So I feel like because of all that talk about dropping judgment, we concern ourselves with never actually having a point of view on anyone and never holding any opinion on someone that might mean that we don't want to be around them quite as much, or we don't trust them with certain things. We feel guilty about that. I also think we may feel guilty about discerning that somebody isn't right for us because we may have been misjudged ourselves. We may have been misread ourselves in the past and it felt bad. So we don't want to put somebody else through that. We would never want to risk making somebody feel like they weren't good enough in some way, because I'm sure we've all felt like we've been made to feel that way too. We've been kicked onto the margins at some point. Some of us have dealt with more rejection than others, you know, but for those who really have felt that rejection has been, let's say, a theme in their life journey, they may not want to oust somebody from their sphere because they don't want to become that energy that hurt them so terribly in the past. You know, they don't want to go down that road. They don't want to be to somebody else the person who once tormented them. They want to break that cycle, and that's admirable. There's nothing wrong with recognizing that you don't want to continue with a cycle of making people feel judged or making people feel like you're being hostile towards them. But sometimes the intuition tells you that something or someone is not right for you. Sometimes the intuition tells you that there are certain relationships that are healthier for you than others. Sometimes your intuition tells you not to go into a collaboration or not to trust somebody with a piece of information. And what do you do when your instinct comes through and tells you that? Do you override it because you're afraid of being somebody who's judgmental? Do you override it because you have convinced yourself that it's your job to manage that other person's emotions? For me, I feel like discernment has been a massive thing that's kept me safe over the course of time. And I feel like I've learned from the times when I didn't allow myself to be discerning. And that's really kind of like bolstered my ability to believe that I'm allowed to discern when something isn't quite right. The difference is I don't need to be cruel about it. And I think that's what I would ask you to take away as well. You don't need to be cruel when you are discerning that something or someone is not necessarily right for you. You don't need to be cruel when discerning that you may not want to get as involved with a particular group of people or a particular community as others maybe are. You don't need to be cruel when delivering to somebody the news that you may need to take some time away from them. You know, none of these things need to involve malice. And none of these things need to involve any unscrupulous agenda. It's really just a case of self-protection, self-preservation, self-nourishment, looking out for yourself, parenting yourself. Not every single opportunity that you're given in this lifetime is the right opportunity for you. And it's completely okay to acknowledge that and to take action on that. I've really loved doing this reading. This has been really interesting. I love these cards. They're great. Oh, I love this. Ecstasy versus obsession. Heart-centered versus mind-centered. Anyone who's a newsletter peep who also is in my heart-centered small business group, you will know that I love that term, heart-centered. One of my favourite compound adjectives, darling. Childlike versus childish. Oh, that one is packing a punch. No doubt. Childlike versus childish. I love that. This is a really great deck. I'd have to think more on what this one means. Destiny versus fate. I feel like they essentially both mean the same thing. But no doubt, you know, of course, there's nuances to every word. Pushing through versus getting lost in. I really like that one. Responding versus reacting. You could also say that those two things essentially are the same, but with nuances that, you know, make them different and different feeling to the vibration. I think responding feels like it comes from a more conscious place. Reacting feels like it comes from more of a base egoic level where you immediately react without sort of thinking. But there you go, I just nearly said respond, so I do feel like those words essentially could mean the same thing. So they might not all be as useful to me as some of them, you know, some will be more useful than others. I've just seen one though that I really like. Where is it? In love or in lust? In love or in lust? I really like that one. Honey bunnies, thank you so much for being here with me while I open these amazing cards, the Fine Lines meditation cards. That's what this deck is called. I really enjoy these cards. They're great. Yeah, they're very thin cardstock, very, very flimsy cardstock, but that's okay. I'm not going to be doing anything too violent with them. I just wanted to have a go because, as I mentioned, I love decks that are just words with no images. And I definitely want to add more decks that are just words into my collection for sure. So it's been really nice to be able to sit with you and just go through some ideas. And yeah, hopefully you've really enjoyed leaning into these messages. So it's the first of a new month. I hope you guys have got some really nice things planned for November. I hope you're not feeling too stressed out about us now hurtling towards the end of the Gregorian year. I'm feeling a little stressed out about it. I saw that it was the 1st of the 11th this morning on my computer. Like, I looked at the date and I was like, oh, that is very sobering. But you know what? It's okay, because at the same time, it's actually the 1st of a new year for me, because Samhain being Gaelic New Year, being Pagan New Year, gives me that incredible fresh start feeling. So, but of course, you know what, and I mentioned this on my Facebook just now, I really do see 1st of November as being Samhain as well. I actually see the late evening of the 31st moving on into then the fullness of the 1st of November as being Samhain, and sometimes I continue my celebrations and my acknowledgements on as well into the 2nd and 3rd, and I will definitely be doing that tomorrow. I've taken the day off. So yeah, I'm giving myself an opportunity to meditate and to be in prayer and in ritual. So I'm going to be doing a reading for myself tonight, because I felt like it just got a little bit too late for me to do it last night. So I opted for a meditation instead and a little bit of crystal ball scrying, which was amazing. But I'm going to be doing my reading tonight, because it just got to this point where my ritual was so full on, and then afterwards I was like, oh, I'm going to do a reading, and then I just started winding down. I was like, oh, there it is, I'm winding right down now. So yeah, I'm going to do it tonight. I hope you guys are well. Thank you so much for watching this video. I very much enjoy sending out the odd exclusive bit of shizzle, and yeah, you know, I think I've gotten very, very used to the luxury of being able to do the jump cuts on my channel, in the sense that I can chill out, I can sip tea for long periods, I can just like relax my shoulders and move my back and know that I can just cut all that out in the jump cuts. And also I really like using the jump cuts because I can give a piece of information without fucking up. So if I fuck up in the middle of a sentence, I can just cut that out and I can make the sentence as clear as it can be, so it can go in clearer. However, I have to say, and I can cut out yawns, but I have to say without any doubt that every time I do an uncut newsletter video, I always think to myself, you could do a lot less jump cuts on your channel. You really don't need to do jump cuts on your channel. You make perfect sense without the jump cuts. So I will endeavour to do less jump cuts, I think. Darlings, thank you so much for spending this time with me, sipping this tea with me, going through these cards with me. I really, really am happy that I got this deck. This is going to be a really cool addition to my collection. Thank you for unboxing it with me and going on a little bit of a journey with me. So, so much love, newsletter peeps. Mwah. Blessed be. See you next time.